now.
Welcome. I'm Erin Johnson, founder of Outstanding Ohio and Realtor with eXp Realty, and I'm excited to have you all here today. As part of my vision for the Outstanding Ohio community, if you are not part of Outstanding Ohio, it's a Facebook group I started about 5 months ago. And in the group, I highlight the people, places, and things that make Ohio great and provide tips from local experts to help you live your best life. And so I invite you to join that. I'll put the link in the chat. I'm always looking for content as well. If you'd like to provide some content from your business to be highlighted in the group, I'd love to have you in there. But as part of my vision for the group, I wanted to really connect with people both in Facebook and outside of Facebook and provide some resources for there's a lot of small business owners in the group, and there's a lot of great knowledge in there. So kind of sharing the wealth of knowledge with each other. And so I connected with Michelle, gosh, I think it was just 2 weeks ago. And I said, hey, would you be willing to talk to the group? And we set this up. So I'm glad we could make this happen. I appreciate her taking the time. And I know she spent some time, tailoring her presentation to this group, which I really appreciate her doing. So I'm going to read to you her bio here, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. So leveraging an entrepreneurial spirit, a background in research, a passion for branding, strong marketing insights, and a bit of humor, Michelle Burgess,
Yep, you got it.
energizes organizations. She helps them chart paths ahead through speaking engagements, facilitated discussions, keynote custom presentations, and workshops. Michelle owns and operates Notavi. Is that how you pronounce it? Should have checked that first. Notavi Creative, a collaborative brand development group with 15 plus years of branding experience and the foresight to identify and deploy best practice creative processes, ideas, and plans. Michelle is uniquely adept at identifying the strengths and cultural elements that drive organizations and their people, pinpointing challenges that often lurk beneath the surface, devising measurable strategies, and empowering teams to affect change. She's a graduate of Bowling Green, and she received her master's from Marquette University, and she's also a Leadership Lorain County graduate. She lives in Avon Lake with her husband and 2 adorable mini mogul daughters. So welcome, Michelle, and thanks for being here with us today.
Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction, Erin, and to Outstanding Ohio for allowing me the opportunity to do this presentation. I'm actually really excited about the size of this group. If you haven't seen it yet, I downloaded or I put a link to the presentation in the chat. I will be screen sharing during our presentation, but most times people are asking questions, hey, can I have that graphic? Or they're worried about taking copious notes. I also know this is your lunch break, so please don't feel embarrassed if you need to grab lunch during this, if you need to step away for a minute. We're all about lunch and learn. My goal for this session is to do even more than I think a lunch and learn. I want to think about it in terms of giving you ingredients and giving you a toolkit so that you walk away thinking more about storytelling and that it's applicable to you. Sometimes you go to these presentations and they're great, but it's a little bit difficult to figure out how to have the capacity to do it or where you go from here for your industry. So I would welcome the opportunity if you have questions. Please don't hesitate. This is a small enough group where I want you to ask them as you're thinking about it. What's really helpful for me is if you can just state your name and remind me of your industry. I have written down your industries, but that way I know the lens that you're coming from so we can talk about it. And if you don't feel comfortable to ask questions on camera, please feel free in the chat. I will try to make sure that I get to all the questions during the session. And if I don't, I'll definitely try to respond to you shortly after the session to address that. So I wanted to open it to the group and just kind of ask you, when you heard storytelling and you signed up for this, what does storytelling mean to you, or what are some of the challenges that you're kind of experiencing in regards to thinking about marketing and storytelling? I'd love for a couple of you to share, just so I kind of have some benchmarks to go on.
I'll share. So what I was thinking about is being able to just kind of create a description of what our businesses are in a way that other people can understand. I feel like people understand through story better than the opposite way, the way we traditionally do that. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. Anybody else?
I was thinking of the same thing. People are more interested in listening to the story and how it relates to them than the facts. So I think it would help me out to pass that information on, make people feel that they understand you better as a person than just what you offer.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll share. I try to post daily on social media, and I've got a good friend who is just a genius when it comes to social media marketing and such. And she talks about like the need to really answer the question that the customer has, not to just, throw facts out there, like Bill kind of said with the storytelling. So I can get better at, presenting things on there that more answers their question.
Perfect. Thank you, Pete. Anybody else? Okay, well, my plan for today is to provide a lot of that. And what I'm going to walk us through is I'm actually going to show you a couple of examples of what Natavi does as a brand. And Erin gave a wonderful, warm example. So Natavi Creative is my company. And so what I try to do in the work that I create is to really put marketing and communications in layman's terms. I'm sure all of you know tons of marketers. But what I try to brand myself on is creating that interpersonal relationship where people are getting to know the team and myself as an identifier of the brand through some storytelling. So I'll show you some examples of that. What I also want to do is walk you through a process in terms of how to better build a story. And then I'll also identify with you what are some archetypes, and I'll explain that, but thinking about what ways in which you should project your business and create a story, because creating a brand voice is really important. And some of the brand and the voice might actually be your own, but it's important to think about how a client engages with you to best think about those types of steps. So with that, I would like to screen share. Erin, I think I need permissions from you to be able to screen share.
Sorry about that. Here we go.
No problem.
Oh, why can't I find it?
Erin, if you go down to screen share, there should be a little caret and arrow that goes up.
There it is. Okay. Multiple participants. There. Thank you.
Mhm.
There we go.
I'm making this full screen, so just 1 second. Okay, there we go. So everyone should be able to see the full screen, correct? Okay, perfect. So not to dive too much into who Natavi Creative is, but just as a background so you understand the lens that I'm coming from with all of this. So I'm a strategist. My background is in research. I enjoy psychology. My dad's a psychologist. So I really like understanding how organizations think and peeling back the layers to identify what makes an organization tick and how to communicate that organization. But also on my team, we have copywriters, graphic designers, social media specialists, and public relations. But together, we're all about creating branding and creating a voice and creating an identity for an organization. But what I absolutely love in working with clients is really figuring out the particulars of what makes a brand and what makes that organization an organization. And when we think about storytelling, the really cool and interesting thing is a lot of us have our own strengths and weaknesses, right? We all play off of if we're more left-brained or if we're more right-brained, if you will. And the same thing is what I want you to keep in mind for storytelling. And I also want to push some of you, perhaps you may consider yourself, if you're in the financial services industry, that you're more left-brained. But what you also need to keep in mind is that your audience and other people that you engage with may actually be operating within the right-minded side. So what's really helpful for storytelling is to constantly be in that mode of thinking about your industry and maybe how your industry operates, but then looking to the other side of the brain in terms of thinking about storytelling as new opportunities that you might not have engaged with before. So what I mean by that is the left brain It's more number skills, science, written language, spoken language, and very analytical perspectives. These are all very important to weave into storytelling. If you have data, it's also great to share how many clients you've engaged with. If you're in the dessert industry, how many cakes you were able to complete, how many weddings you were able to do, how many bookings that you had. People are very interested in numbers. So think about that in terms of some of your storytelling. Then on the flip side, for some of the storytelling for Right Brain, it's really thinking about the visuals, right? And for social media, as the saying goes, a picture tells 1,000 words. Anytime you're doing social media, think about opportunities to embed that with a photo, even if it's a cell phone photo that you've taken or a piece that you've worked on, or if you're talking about your services that you provide, you know, show a picture of a brochure, something to contextualize and add imagery is always more stop scroll worthy than just sharing an actual post. And so with Right Brain and storytelling, it's thinking about videos might be a better mode. And that might be an opportunity to push yourself and do more of what's called vlogging, which is video blogging opportunities. But Right Brain people are more creative. They tap into services in a different way that's different than analytical. So it's just good to kind of keep in that mode of thinking about how things work back and forth. And I'll kind of show you some of my own personal examples of how that can actually work. So these are just a couple of snapshots from Natavi Creative. And I highlighted the engagement at the bottom with how people are kind of reacting and engaging with it. So Natavi Creative, as you can imagine, is a very creative type of industry, right? We work on outward communications all the time. But for our more analytical people, we knew that certain file types were very helpful and beneficial. So we created certain post types about how to mechanically do something. And we got a lot of great engagement with that, where people were interested in what we were doing because we were providing more of that analytical, detailed, technical lens. So that was one example of how we pushed ourselves to think left brain, right brain. On the more creative side, we did another flip where instead of just saying happy Halloween, or we want all of our customers to have a safe holiday, what type of education or information can we share and provide in that holiday lens? So again, it's all about trying to create some education, some fun, and some art. So that was an example of what we did on social media, like for some ideas for storytelling. Other times it's just being straightforward and just indicating how you yourself are doing something in relation to your industry. So a lot of times we always show client examples, but Natavi Creative, we launched Natavi Creative in 2008. Before that, I had another agency. So I've been an entrepreneur for 13 years now. But people were excited and they were interested in what we were doing with our own branding. So it was an opportunity to tell our own story versus just our client examples. Other opportunities, it's where you're going, who you're connecting with, who you're engaging with. The Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland was an amazing opportunity for us. We did some engagement work for them. Sometimes when you post, it's a little bit of a litmus test and what's going to stick and what people are going to react to. And so it's interesting to see the different types of engagements. For me, one thing that really surprised me, and it's something that I want all of you to really think and be mindful of, and the pandemic's really changed this a lot, videos. A lot of people have more bandwidth and they're more interested in watching and doing videos. As a marketer, in full disclosure, I was a little bit nervous to do videos because I felt that videos had to be very high end, very commercial quality. But the types of videos that people really reacted to were more of the grassroots types of videos, even Zoom recorded interviews, where it was an opportunity for people to see me, to hear me, to understand how I work with people. And as you can see, like through the analytics, like on the screen share, this was our most successful way to engage, was through some of our video work, because we were actually able to do verbal storytelling. And so for us, like the number of views, 645 was incredible for our type of organization. So I'd really suggest that you think about an opportunity to do vlogging or to record videos. And the threshold that people usually have with storytelling is very short. So sometimes organizations want to talk, 10 minutes at length about their organization. You keep it short. 90 seconds is kind of that sweet spot that I would really advocate for video. A couple more on this, and then I'm going to dive into the next segment. Again, sometimes it's a matter of highlighting the work and saying what we've been a part of. Also for people to understand the different touch points that you have in different industries. This is kind of a cool example. Another thing that I want people to keep in mind, and I will touch a little bit more specifically on a social media strategy and some timing, but the big thing for storytelling is all of us, when we're working on our own material or we're working on our own marketing, there's a little bit of a hope and a prayer when it goes out, right? You push it out into the world and you hope that people are going to react to it, that they're going to call you, that they're going to engage with you. But the thing that we need to remember is whether it's social or whether we're doing cold calls, to hope that we have a reaction to one post or one interaction is very not traditional, right? Like you have to kind of hit the pavement a number of times. You have to post a number of times. And I think people get very concerned. Ooh, I kind of posted on that topic already. Post again. You know, you miss so much on social media. So don't be afraid to remind people or put a slight different spin on something that you've already shared it. So I'm going to show an example with you right here. So we did an amazing event for Ursuline College. Ursuline College is one of our clients, and we did a fantastic event, and we were really excited and celebrated it and acknowledged all the different partners that we worked with. So we had 693 people that engaged with the post, which means they've seen it, they stopped, they read it. And then we had 118 people that commented, that engaged with it, and 7 people shared it. Those were great analytics for us. Then literally a week later, we shared it all over again saying, hey, we got our professional photos back from this event. We had 370 guests. So again, we're kind of weaving in some small analytics, but that was another opportunity where we had 239 people, maybe some of the same, maybe some new, same topic, but that reacted to this. So it just goes to show that even if you're telling the same story or you're repeating it or you're using different imagery, the story doesn't stick until you tell it multiple times. So that's just one small example to kind of show you that. People are curious, even from a personality standpoint, of what you're doing. Natavi Creative is a brand, but it's also me as part of being the owner. People know Natavi Creative for who I am and some of my team members that are on the team. And people are excited to see what you're up to and what you're doing. So I'm a Cleveland-based firm, but I do have clients that are out of state, Pennsylvania being one of those. And we had the opportunity to do a big workshop in Pennsylvania. And people were really excited about that. They were excited for the brand and they were happy to be part of like our story. And so again, there was an opportunity where 384 people reacted to this and 142 people were engaged. And so it's really neat things that kind of transpire from that. So that one workshop led to a woman taking her photo with me at an event, and she celebrated it and shared it on her own site. And so it just kind of shows some of the rippling effect of if you tell your story and people become aware of it and they tag, then that story can continue in terms of threading it through. Another interesting thing, sometimes it's amazing to realize that your friends or your network, that you assume they know what you do, that they would assume or that you think they understand what financial service is all about, or if you work for a nonprofit, what your particular nonprofit does, because you feel like you've told them. But it's important to remember that so many times people don't know all the particulars of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So this was an incredible example and kind of a wake-up call for me. Our company handles printing. We work with a ton of print vendors, but we manage that print process. That is a chunk of our business. But I realized even in posting this, people followed up with me after they saw this post and they said, oh, could you help us with this print project? Could you help us facilitate this? And it dawned on me that until you put it out into the world and you really, really tell people what you do, they're not going to know. So it's important to make sure that you tell the particulars of what you do with storytelling. And lastly, this one to me is one of the coolest posts. I had an amazing opportunity to meet Cokie Roberts, who's a well-known reporter. But the important thing that I kind of took away from contextualizing your work is to contextualize your work into the environment and into society and how you play a small role into maybe a larger project. So if it is financial services, take a look at hot things that are happening in the market. Or with insurance, insurance is all about protecting your family or protecting your assets. There's a lot that's happening, of course, like in Texas and natural disasters and things that are happening. It's an opportunity to talk about, hey, there's a lot that's going on. Think about the work that you do and contextualize it into thinking about protection or being proactive to certain situations. Same with photography. It's thinking about, hey, wedding season is coming upon us, anticipating things for seniors that are coming up, thinking about how to, summertime is always a big time where people are thinking and reevaluating their own personal goals and assets. So it's a chance to maybe dig deep and think about photography through a corporate lens. So it's different things like that that are really helpful to think of. Any questions in regards to that point before I dive into some consideration sets and taking inventory as a next step? Okay, then I will continue on. So this is something cool too with storytelling that's always just helpful to see and understand. Oops. Okay, so one of the important things is before storytelling occurs, even if you're a company that's been in business for a while, or even if you're at the start of your trajectory with the industry that you're in, it's important to take in inventory of where you are at. Meaning, if you've been in business for a while, you've done lots of things already, right? But sometimes it's important to take a step back and really evaluate, hey, what's been working for my storytelling? How have I gotten leads? Like, what has dawned in people's minds in terms of being an organization that they want to engage? Or for landscaping, what have been like the biggest word of mouth referrals? Is it a particular type of service that I provide? Or what is becoming more of the bread and butter? Or if I realize I'm missing a big chunk of the pie, what do I really need to advocate for more? So this is an example of a nonprofit organization that we did some work with. It's the Community Foundation of Lorain County. And before we came on board and worked with them, these were all the different types of stories that they were telling. And as you can see from a visual standpoint, it's very different. They're articulating different things. In working with them, this is kind of a visual representation of how we really tried to bring and consolidate and think through their messaging, through their visual look, and really streamlined things so that they had a very, an element of continuity and consistency. So when you saw the brand and you read the messaging, you knew what to expect from that organization. Other things that we try to do is really think about messaging that you've used in the past and how can you break it down to make it more digestible for people. I'm a very visual learner, so sometimes it's helpful for me to show graphics like this. But if you have a service industry and there's different buckets and different key particulars that you serve, think about it graphically. Are there different icons that you could use to describe the different service aspects? This is a great example of how we did that. This particular company is Connexus NEO, and they talk to the manufacturing industry. They talk to information technology, and they talk to healthcare. So as you can imagine, talking to those different groups necessitated using a slightly different lens and using different verbiage for each. But even understanding the particular buckets made it more clear to be able to identify how to communicate to those different industries. So sometimes before you even write stories, you may have a lot of low-hanging fruit already, things that you've done, old brochures that maybe you don't like anymore, but there could be pieces and parts that are just really helpful to identify first before you start thinking about your messaging moving forward. So here's another example. This one was kind of my nonprofit sector. We do a lot of work in nonprofits, but we also work with B2B and business to consumer. But again, it's breaking down an organization and thinking about it either through colors or icons, but it's a great systematic way to really hone it in and identify, hey, we're talking to those that work with reducing older adult isolation, or we're talking to school-based health, very, very different. But as you know, within your particular industry and your particular business, there's a lot of times you're talking to different industries and different clients, or clients are looking for very different services over time. So it's important to kind of understand those buckets. Any questions on that part so far? Okay. This part's really cool and it gets you to think, and I'll actually ask you what you think, and then I'll show you a video and you may change your answer. This is called brand archetypes. It's nothing that I came up with, but it's more within the marketing and personality lens. And brand archetypes are an opportunity to really understand how you want your company to be branded and what's the personality of the brand. And I'd really advocate, some of you are the brand in a way, right? Like you're the leader, you're the owner, but it's important to separate your individual self from your organizational branding. And you need to think about your organizational brand and what your organizational brand embodies. And it's how you want to project yourself and what you want to be known for are all considerations as part of an archetype. So I work with a client, and the client is in the financial, he's a financial advisor. And it's kind of a cool story because not only am I a client of his, but we also do his marketing. He's an amazing guy. But I would ask you the question, for a financial advisor, what do you think their archetype would be? What would they be projecting? Thoughts?
Sage.
Knowledge, yeah, knowledge.
Anybody else?
Explorer.
Explorer?
Hero. Hero.
Hero? Okay, good.
Hero.
I was gonna say control.
I was too. Yeah, the ruler.
Yep.
So I'm going to show you a little video. It's 2 minutes. I honestly don't know if I'm going to play the whole entire thing because I think you'll kind of get where I'm going. But I want to show you this, and I want to see if watching this video changes what you think about an archetype based on storytelling. And the audio should work, but if it doesn't, can somebody just raise their hand just so I know that it's not working?
My father, Bill Vines, grew up on a
Can you
dairy
hear
farm.
it?
This was a place called Paradise Hill, just outside of Ashland, Ohio. In September of 1990, my grandfather, 62, just received his first retirement check. He was settling into retirement with the kids grown and a farm to maintain. One afternoon, he was out back behind the main barn on an embankment, pushing dirt with his tractor like he always did. The tractor rolled over on him, crushed his rib cage, and he was stuck. They rushed him to the hospital. A few hours later, my grandfather took his last breath. As my family regrouped in the weeks to follow, we found out there wasn't enough life insurance. Life insurance to pay the debt on the farm, to keep the house. Our family had some tough decisions to make. I remember being upstairs as a 6-year-old boy looking out in the farmhouse apartment upstairs, and row by row, they sold every tractor and piece of machinery that my dad and grandpa used every day. Vines View Farms was no more. My dad picked up the pieces. He was inspired to start a new career. Far from milking cows and driving semi-trucks, he started selling life insurance. 12 years passed. My parents ended up building a house on that Paradise Hill. In my first semester in college, I received a phone call from my dad and said, "I have cancer. I have lung cancer." My heart sank. What was I gonna do? Is my mom okay? Is my sister okay? Do I have to quit school? 18 months later, the cancer spread and he was gone. He was only 47 years old. But this time was different. We had life insurance. Every day, I miss my dad. I miss him tremendously. But I thank him daily that he chose to buy life insurance. My Paradise Hill family experienced two very, very different stories. One, unfortunately, ended in auction. The other ended with a continuation of love and the support that he wanted to maintain for us. Life insurance, it saved my family. It shaped my life. My hope is that you'd allow life insurance to protect your life too.
So I'm going to stop screen sharing. Do you think now seeing that video, did it change the perspective on what the archetype is for you?
Well, definitely caring. I don't know if it was on the list, but
Yeah, caring is definitely a big aspect that maybe wouldn't have come initially from that particular industry. But anybody else, did it change their thinking?
Can you show that on your screen again?
The video?
Not the video, the archetype.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I still think I'm keeping my answer.
Can everybody see it now?
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying with my answer of hero, because there's a real hero story in there.
Yes. So the really cool thing about this is, you know, when you hear a particular industry, it might not dawn on you, or you might have assumptions about what you think that industry does until you hear their story or until they start crafting their message. And the amazing thing about Tyson is we really thought initially, and hero I think is accurate, sage is accurate, but Tyson at the end of the day is a caregiver. He works extremely hard to provide a service and to take care of others and to make sure that they don't encounter horrible opportunities where they're just left in a complete struggle. And that's part of his ongoing story and his ongoing messaging in regards to his service. And it just goes to show that putting himself out there like that in a business standpoint, it's a true reflection of who he is and what he does. But people may automatically think, oh, you should lead with sage. Like you need to share knowledge first and have people intersect with you strictly there. And it's really understanding the essence of who you are and how you want to engage with people and what you want to be known for that can really change how you project and how you storytell. Okay, so those are just a couple of important things that I think are really, really helpful when thinking about storytelling.
Do those colors have any significance in terms of how you brand then?
They can. Color exploration is a whole nother area. So that's a great question. That can be a whole nother area where it's like color diagnostics.
Well, I didn't know, since you said caregiver, if that dark green was part of his brand then because he's a caregiver.
His colors are, and this is his color palette right here, but it is kind of in that dark hue. So you're absolutely right. Some of those contextual things definitely play together. But I want you to take a moment, and here's an example of where some brands, like more national brands, just so you can see how it falls. But these are how some national brands associate themselves. So like Dove, like skincare is more like innocent. Coca-Cola is innocent. Google is the sage. Like Google is projecting knowledge and education. Explorer, you have REI. Outlaw, it makes sense, right? Like you have Harley Davidson. So there's a lot of different brands like that. But write down for yourself, like what you want to exude, what you want to communicate. For our brand, for Natavi, we're the everyman. We want to make sure that we connect with people and that they understand layman's terms, that we can create a relatability and a transparency and be able to work with clients time and time again, where we meet them where they are. So that's our lens with how we communicate with people. And I think that goes back to the types of videos that we did and why they were so successful. If we did these very high-end videos all of the time, people might not feel like we're able to be relatable or that we're willing to talk with them. But doing things that are more organic or that are more grassroots like has been very effective for us. So it's really thinking about that type of aspect. Pete, I apologize I didn't answer your earlier question regarding left brain and right brain. So we should have left brain and right brain stories to match our customers. The answer is yes. You're not constantly changing your messaging, but it's thinking about, could I share a story that has data that's a driver in my story? Should I be thinking about visuals to appeal to the right brain type of customers? So it's not talking out of one mouth and or out, it's not talking out of one side of the mouth and then doing something different, but it's thinking about how to take one story and make sure that it can be applicable to both types of customers. Any questions on that part so far? So this is an important graphic that I think is really helpful. Some of our workshops, like people have hung this on a wall, they've printed this out, and it's just an opportunity to have this as kind of a checkpoint. And I did it, this graphic is in the PDF that I had, but this is kind of the writing process in thinking about storytelling and how to develop a story. So being mindful, I think, let me see, do I have this on here? No, I have this on a different one. Oh, sorry about that. So being mindful, like it's really important to think about, you kind of want to work backwards in a way, meaning what do you want the call to action to be? How do you want people to take your story and what do you want them to do with it? Do you want people to better understand what you do, the types of services that you have, the types of ingredients that you use, stylistically, what makes you different than somebody else that does something similar? So it's really thinking about what's the target, like what are you trying to achieve at the end of the day, and work backwards from that. Establishing an author persona, this is kind of a big one. A lot of times, whether it's just you that's writing the story or if you have a couple of people writing the story, it's really thinking about the type of persona, even small, simple semantics as, do you use I in your language? Or is it more talking about, here's what we do in terms of our team approach? Author personas also, again, thinking back to the brand archetypes. How are you projecting yourself? Are you talking from a nurturing viewpoint? Are you talking from a very sage approach where, hey, you need to show and demonstrate your knowledge? What type of persona are you communicating? If you work for a nonprofit organization, but you're just talking about the bottom line and that you just need money in order for fundraising, but you're not telling the stories of the beneficiaries who are receiving these services or how you're making a difference, it's not matching up. So it's really thinking about, are you talking in a way that's projecting the type of brand that you're trying to communicate? Authenticate. Authenticate is all about making it personal and making it stand out, that what is making you different as an organization, what is making you different as a leader within your organization, and creating an opportunity for people to want to engage with you versus calling upon somebody else that does very similar work. So it's really creating authenticity in the types of stories that you're creating. Don't give people general advice. Give them advice on how you or your organization would handle something or how you can help them in a certain situation. Ground with facts. Again, this kind of goes back to the left brain, right brain, but people want to know facts. They want to know data points. What are some quantifiable things that you did in 2020 that you're really excited about? What's on the horizon for 2021? How can you ground with facts, numbers, particulars? Any type of factual points really help in storytelling. Balance light and dark. Sometimes this, depending on the particular industry, but for nonprofits, when nonprofits are talking about sad stories about animals all the time, we know it, the Sarah McLachlan videos, right? Where she's bringing out the animals, like there can only be so much that you can take of that. It is a great strategy, but there's a certain point where you want to shut it off, right? It's too much. Balance it out. Yes, tell those sob stories if it's going to help you get your bottom line, but also celebrate the good and talk about the people that are helping those animals. Talk about the number of animals that you saved. Show the happy kitty in the backyard that's out playing, not these animals that are all going to be slaughtered all the time. So it's thinking about, balance, light and dark. Even if you work in a very serious industry, allow people to get to know you. Create some more relatability for who you are and how you can engage with clients. If you golf, if you play a musical instrument, people down the line may say, oh, I didn't know that you did this. That's great. You're giving people an opportunity to see more into your organization and more into you. Define a vantage point. How are you looking at a situation? How are you coming at it? And what that means is you might think about talking through the client perspective, or you might think about talking about your organization from a leadership perspective. Think about whose vantage point you can look at that may be very different. That's where testimonials can be amazing. They're not hearing it from you, but you're weaving in a quote from somebody that's experienced your service or engaged with you. That is an example of a different vantage point. And connect with audience. It's a constant reminder to also think about, who's on your database. Are you sending an email? Who's on your database? If you're using your social networks, LinkedIn and the way that you communicate on LinkedIn is different than how you're using Facebook and Twitter. So it's really thinking about where you're putting that story and how you can connect with audiences there as well. So I'm going to move on to this last section for thinking about a process and how to write and do storytelling. And pretty soon I'm going to pull off this graphic because it may allow us a better chance to kind of talk with one another. But this graphic is in that side presentation. But this is the overview process. Like, of course, you start with drafting. And the big thing to keep in mind, like when you're creating a draft, is a lot of people, and I've heard this a lot, but people will say, I'm not a writer. Like, I'm really afraid with storytelling because I stink at writing. I'm not really good at writing. And the biggest thing is you can't really overcome storytelling by just saying, hey, I don't write. Some of the best storytellers, they figure out what works for them. If the written word is very helpful, but you're not a good writer, put it out in bullet form. You can communicate in different ways that are concise, to the point. You can have somebody help you if you have bullets versus working with a blank canvas. Audio record it. Sometimes I've done that for myself. I've recorded what I've said, and it makes for a much better story because it's more conversational and casual. And I use my notes and I create a story from that because I heard it and it sounds good and conversational, but sometimes I get stuck in my own head. If I sit down and I try to write something formal, it may not sound like me. So that's another opportunity of different ways in which you can create a draft. Another thing, and I'd really love for you all to do this, is we're all in this together, right? You signed up for this group because you wanted to storytell. Some of the best people to help tell your own story are people that aren't in the trenches with you, because they may hear language that you use and they might say, oh, I don't understand what that acronym is. And you've realized, oh my gosh, I use that all the time. Like, people don't know what that is. So I'd recommend that you make connections on here. Try to see if you can find a storytelling buddy. And what I mean by that is schedule a one-on-one where you can brainstorm and say, here's what I'm trying to do. What do you think about this? Vet it. Have an opportunity to talk with somebody else that's not in your industry. So I'm going to pull off this graphic just so I can see all of you and address any questions. But this is in that PowerPoint that I had. So then the second one is the second point on here is to reconfirm what you want to do. So it's always important to think about a strategy and how this folds into your bigger story. What action are you seeking from your story? So it's a constant reminder to have with thinking about what you want to do. And that goes along to, what's your closing? I think so many times there's a missed opportunity when somebody tells a story, like they just put it out there, blah, but then they don't say, hey, if you're interested in receiving these services, if you want to schedule a one-on-one with me, if you're interested in participating in our capital campaign, if you'd like a free consult, have a call to action. Sometimes I think people are very shy and they're very timid to ask for that. Part of why people are following you or they're engaging with you or they're seeing your e-newsletter is because they want to learn about you. So don't be afraid to close with a little mini closing note that helps kind of seal the deal. The next one is to execute it and to think again. Don't just put it out there one time and really hope that it's going to stick. Think about it in a multitude of ways. And this is kind of the simplest form I can think of. You create a document, you create your story, okay? That same story can be pushed out into an email. That same story can be pushed out on social. You could break it up, and have little mini snippets from your story. That can also be housed on your website. It could also be used as talking points when you go to a networking event. So the energy that you spend on creating one document can have a lot of life. And so it's important to think about getting something drafted, anything drafted, and then you're able to pull parts and pieces from it. Quotes are amazing as graphics. You can use, even in PowerPoint, you can design things in PowerPoint. You can design things in Canva, or you can work with an agency firm that has higher skills. But think about taking basic things that you have and making the most of them. Releasing, we talked a little bit about that. Posting things are really important to think about. Resharing, don't be afraid to repeat the story in a different way. Hey, I wanted to circle back to the story. We were able to secure this many bookings for weddings, or we mentioned it's wedding season and here are some things to take into consideration. Or it's that time of year where it's important to evaluate your financial security, or it's tax season. Think about dates that make sense. Take a look at the calendar and try to align the work that you do with things that are happening or on the cusp. In the PowerPoint, I also included some technical considerations. Whenever you post on social media, I'm sure there's been times you post something and you're like, not many people saw it. And it's kind of disheartening, a little bit, especially when you're running it. In the PowerPoint, I also indicated some suggested times that are healthy to post on certain mediums, meaning Facebook, a really sweet window is between 1 and 4 p.m. where LinkedIn, 7 to 8:30 a.m. is a better sweet spot, or 5 to 6 p.m. for LinkedIn. And these are all mathematical formulas that, I've found research and different sources that provide this, but it's also just a reminder to recognize the story may be great. So don't get disheartened if people don't seem to engage with that particular story, because from a technicality standpoint, you just might not have posted it at the right time. So I don't want you to feel like, well, I tried it once and it didn't go right. I'm done. It takes a continual amount of putting it out there time and time again to see if it'll stick. And it's also really helpful, whether it's social media or thinking about general content. What are some general buckets? On Mondays, can I talk about our staff? On Tuesdays, can I talk about cool spotlight projects that I've done? On Wednesdays, can I offer a tip? And I know Erin's even doing that with Outstanding Ohio. She's looking for buckets of content. Think about that for your own wheelhouse. What are some ongoing buckets of content? And even if you don't do it on a routine basis for social media, even thinking about your buckets will really, really be helpful as a tool for ongoing mechanisms. Let's see here. And kind of the last part, a big thing that I see as missed opportunities is really creating a culture for storytelling. Again, all of us might not feel like, hey, I'm a great writer, or I'm not really a good photographer, or I'm not really sure what to say. You're at events and you're at meetings and you're doing planning, and you know at the end of the day what goals you're trying to reach, but think about the modes of that, things that will help you get there. always, like if you're doing a project, if you're at a meeting and it makes sense, take pictures of some type of engagement or some type of opportunity. Because it's amazing in hindsight, people are like, oh, I wish I would have captured that. Like if you're not readily thinking about it, you don't do it. And even on your small team meetings, bring it up. Say, we're trying to encourage our storytelling. What are some good stories? What are you attending? What are some things that happen that maybe I'm not aware of? Because if you don't build it into your culture, then stories are going to be one-hit wonders and they're just going to happen when you're the driver. So try to think about opportunities where people are constantly thinking about it. And I think the biggest thing that's holding people back is, yes, it takes time. Like storytelling does take time and energy and capacity. But I think the hardest part is really getting started and having people feel comfortable to just actually get some things on paper and start testing some things out and putting things together. And you really won't know what's going to stick and what's going to work until you try a lot of different things. And I really think, especially now, like the great news is the vaccine is out and people are, I feel like we're kind of, a fog has been lifted a little bit from a business standpoint. Like it really seems like people are on the trajectory of, hey, we want to get everybody's engine going. But now is a perfect opportunity where people are still kind of in pandemic mode, but there's more of an interest in wanting to know what's out there and what's happening. People are paying a lot more attention to social media. So now is still kind of a very sweet opportunity to test some things and try some things. Try the video, try some graphics, try different things like that to see what's going to stick. So we have a couple minutes left. I know some people might be on tight timelines with meetings that they have to go to, but I am happy to take questions, to provide some thoughts. So I'll kind of open it up to the group.
I'll ask a question, Michelle. I was thinking about this a little bit. With the whole storytelling, like, it doesn't really matter basically what you're saying. Video, using images, just mix it all up. Okay.
I think it is very healthy. The one thing that I would advocate for is that you think about it systematically, meaning for your videos, do a consistent style. Like if you're gonna do like a vlogging format and you're kind of doing this and you're talking, do that all the time, but don't mix it up where then somebody's recording you and you're doing yourself. Like try to think about templates. For graphics, use the same color background if you're talking about a particular aspect of your service. Always use purple if you're talking about X. Always use blue if you're talking about Y. Because visually people start to remember things and they start to identify, oh, this is with this. And it may sound funny, but don't be afraid to, you may feel like you're on autopilot or that you're saying the same thing over and over, but don't be afraid to be like, hi, I'm Amy and I work on financial services and I love to engage with people about X, and then dive into your conversation. You will feel like you are repeating yourself a ton. You personally are, but your audience won't think that. It's a reminder. Yeah. But yes, try new mediums, but try to do the mediums in a consistent way within each of those buckets. Is anybody thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't know how this applies to me, or I don't really know how to do that for my industry? Is anybody struggling with how to apply some of these ideas to what they do?
No, I think trying to collect them and try to put them down is one thing. You opened up a lot of ideas for me, to be honest. And I've always struggled with Facebook and LinkedIn and not sure exactly how to do it, and was never good at being consistent. I do it like within a week or so, then all of a sudden a week later I don't do anything. All of a sudden it's 2 weeks later and I go, oh my goodness. And now I'm doing it again, and it's like you almost have to have a routine. And I commend Erin because you do that, and I see how it works. She grew Outstanding Ohio very well for doing that. And so I like all your ideas. I definitely downloaded your templates, some of those key points you have are going to help me out. I think I'll try it, and probably will need some help down the road, but
No, but
that's what I see. I understand it. I just see the, how I can wrap myself around to be consistent. That's my problem.
right. No, and thank you for sharing that, Bill. And I think the other thing is there are platforms that are out there, like Hootsuite is one example, and you may want to write that down. It's a mechanism where you can put a post in and it'll schedule when your post goes to Facebook, when it goes to LinkedIn, when it goes to Twitter. And it can be a very helpful tool to schedule things versus feeling like, oh, I have to post this right now so that people see it within the window. That's the beautiful thing about corporate or business related pages, because with Hootsuite, you can schedule things so that it populates at the time of 1 o'clock on a Wednesday and you're in a meeting. So even dedicating a couple hours a week or a month to preset that schedule might even be an opportunity where you don't feel like it's so daunting of doing it on a consistent basis. So something to take a look at.
Well, and Bill and I have talked recently about, he has challenges of, there's certain things he's not allowed to say being in the financial sector, but it's like, how can you kind of weave in just some of your persona and things that maybe have nothing to do with financials, but make people know, like, and trust him with the financials and the facts and stuff like that. So I think a lot of what you said today kind of plays to that, as well as trying to weave that in and balance that content.
And I know for the financial industry, some people want to know what the larger entities are that you work with. Like there's a lot of brand power in some of the larger banks or where you're pulling some of your information or your data from. So even acknowledging some of the bigger branded partnerships that you have are also eye-opening for people, and that becomes of interest. So it's an opportunity to share who your partners are or who the larger institutions are that you're working with, because that can create some, not that you need it, but that can create some credibility in terms of what your business is built on and some of the fundamentals and some of the philosophies that work with some of those kind of entities. So that can also be helpful to kind of weave in the mindsets that the larger organizations have that you engage with. Anybody else, anything that they're struggling with or trying to think how they can apply some of this to them?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for taking the time. I think everybody really appreciated. I do want to mention upcoming Outstanding Ohio events. We are doing 2 networking events this month. We're going to do a virtual, which we've been doing the last couple months. That one will be on the 30th of March at noon. And we're also going to try in person. If you're ready to meet in person, we're going to meet in the Co-Lounge in Fairlawn, 9 a.m. Friday the 19th. And the next educational event is going to be how to grow your YouTube channel on March 23rd at 4 o'clock. So I will send out information about all of those in a follow-up email along with Michelle's link and the recording when we have that ready. So stay tuned for more. But I appreciate you taking the time, Michelle, and for everybody to give up your lunch hour to join us, and hope you found it beneficial.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks.
Thanks, too.